Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 991 just came out and we have a lot of matchups to talk about because that's what this chapter felt like to me, setting up a lot of matchups for the Battle of Onigashima. So, to start with, let's just get this out of the way. It looks like X Drake is basically, he's going to be part of the squad going forward for the rest of this Onigashima battle. I like how it wasn't, as simple as basically, I'm X Drake, you might think of me as an enemy, but I'm dropping in, please let me join your side. It was more like, the classic Luffy thing where basically Luffy doesn't always go with the most logical option. He's going with his gut, with his intuition. But the reality is that his intuition is usually right. And I like that we got that little flashback between Drake and Kobe before this, where basically Kobe described the type of person Luffy is, and that does sum him up pretty well. And I think that's the second time in the series that we've gotten this sort of quote about Luffy, the first time, of course, being with Mihawk, where it's explained that Luffy has this ability to sort of draw people to him. And it's not just that he draws people to him, he draws the right people to him, right? Like, it's to the point that even characters like Bellamy, who were once basically mortal enemies with Luffy or who despised his character, even they ultimately come in basically into the fold of like the Straw Hat umbrella because Luffy just has that knack for drawing the right type of people towards him. And if you're an enemy, as it was said, Luffy's not going to forgive those type of people. Like characters like Caesar, they're never going to join the crew or anything like that. Characters like Crocodile or whatever. Like Luffy doesn't accept certain types of people into his fold or into his circle. So I like that we got that little flashback, but just in general, Luffy has such good intuition about the type of person you really are inside. And we saw that with Nami, where like even with Nami, we thought that Nami had betrayed the crew. Luffy saw through that. We saw that with Robin, where Luffy was unreasonably stubborn in terms of how much he wanted to get Robin back, even though like by all means it was kind of a like, let's just drop her and go situation, because Luffy could tell the type of person that you are on the inside. I'd say Pudding is probably the only time in the series that I can really think of that Luffy just got it straight up wrong. But you can kind of go, 2 layers deep with that and be like, deep down, Pudding was actually a good person. So, on the surface, she's a good person. Underneath that, she's, like a traitorous kind of big mom spy. And then below that, she has a soft center at the very least. So at the end of the day, Luffy actually was right with his intuition about her as well, just in a weird way. But that's a long tangent. The point being that Luffy sees that X Drake has, pure intentions in terms of going over to their side, and he's not going to betray them. He is ready to fight against the Beast Pirates. Even if, like, the background of the Marines and stuff is not something that Luffy picks up on right away. I do like that the rest of the crew is not that accepting of X Drake, and it's not just as simple as like, oh, X Drake is hopping in, we're buddies with him now. Everybody else is pretty strongly opposed to the idea of just letting a Beast Pirates member onto their side in this battle, but Luffy kind of just overrides them. They're like, the classic, like, everybody's acknowledging him as a captain, but as an idiot captain. But as an idiot captain who we, the reader, also knows is correct. The other thing I like is that even after Luffy gives the okay for X Drake joining the crew, Zoro still goes after X Drake. Like, I know people have gotten kind of obsessed with the idea that like Zoro is the perfect subordinate, the most loyal subordinate. He always follows Luffy's orders. Like, he would never do something like Sanji, like go against what Luffy says or disobey his captain. That's not true. All the Surats are individuals. They're going to make their own calls in certain situations, and we see that right here as well. Like, just because Luffy's saying, hey, I want X Drake, doesn't mean that Zoro's going to just blindly go along with something that he thinks is a terrible decision. And I really like that happened, because then we get to see Zoro fight X Drake a little bit, which is a cool little matchup that, like, I kind of wanted to see, because, so far we've gotten Zoro against a couple of the Supernovas, right? We've gotten Zoro against Killer, obviously, although at the time we didn't know it. We only found out in hindsight that Zoro actually beat Killer without us realizing it. And we got a skirmish between Zoro and Hawkins, which I thought was like a great opening fight for Wano. And now we get another skirmish between Zoro and X Drake. So I like seeing this supernova on supernova action. There was a bit more of it towards the end of the chapter. I'll talk about that in a bit. But it's clear that like they're not going to keep fighting. By the end of the chapter, once they got that Apoo, again, I'll talk about that in a little bit, they're clearly on the same page at this point, so we didn't get to really see them both go all out. Now, on the point of Apoo, what I really liked was that I think this was the most clear panel we've had in a little bit of Luffy using Future Sight when Apoo was about to attack Luffy and Sanji with his music, right? Because there was some discussion going on throughout the early parts of Onigashima, like, is Luffy using Future Sight? What points is he using Future Sight? I think during the Luffy versus Ulti and Page 1 fight, we got Luffy he used Future Sight, we could tell, because it seemed like he was calling things in advance, but it was a little bit ambiguous still, right? Like, it wasn't like a blatant sort of like, oh, he's seeing the future. It was like, we could infer there are points that he's seeing the future. But right here, especially if you look at the official translation of it, in this chapter, there's a panel before Apoo starts playing his music that it like zooms in specifically on Luffy. There's like a little sound effect, like a little light symbol around his head or whatever, and it's clear that he's seeing something in advance, which I really like. And then he says, uh-oh, cover your ears. So I really like that. I hope that we keep getting more and more like blatant examples of Luffy using Future Sight like that, because it's just cool. That's one of my favorite abilities that Luffy's picked up. I just want to see him use it more frequently, because it's just really sick to see Luffy being able to like call things out in advance like Katakuri could. And it worked out perfectly here. It pretty much shut down Apoo's attack. So, people can stop talking about how Apoo took care of like Luffy, Zoro, and Kid at once and all that stuff. Anyway, on that note, Apoo, I'm trying to get a gauge of like what his fighting style is if he can't affect people with music, right? Because it looks like he's doing a little bit like people on the Beast Pirates obviously mentioned, Hyogoro and his mafia buddy obviously mentioned like Apoo is kind of like an animal tamer, because he's getting the numbers to do his dirty work for him. So now I wonder if that's the next step. If Apoo can't directly damage you with his music attacks, is his next step basically just like use music to influence people to do his bidding for him. I would like to see him still getting like some like hand-to-hand fighting abilities, because he's got that long arm fighting style that I hope to see in action against like a strong character. But it is also cool to see that like he's able to manipulate the numbers to basically work as his minions, because the first time we saw Apoo in Wano was in conjunction with the numbers arriving. So I wonder if Apoo's kind of like the ringleader of the numbers, and he travels around with them, having them destroy towns and villages and stuff like that, and he's their like animal tamer, So the numbers, we've been knocking them out one after another, but this guy, Hachi, I've got to check the name again. I feel like it's not going to be called Hachi because we already have a character named Hachi. But the number 8 dude, he's the one, I guess, that's sort of being built, like he was there earlier trying to interfere with Luffy and Zoro. I feel like he's the one that's, I guess, the strongest of the ones that we've seen so far, though I wonder how much variance there is among the numbers in terms of strength. There's still some silhouettes that we saw initially when the numbers were arriving at Wano, like all those chapters ago. There's still some silhouettes that we saw that I think we have not yet gotten to see. And so I still don't know, maybe we haven't even seen the strongest of the numbers yet. But again, so it looks like Zoro and X-Drake ended up going off to team up against Apoo. Although I don't know how long-lived that little matchup is going to be, because, 2v1, 2 supernovas versus 1 supernova, I don't think that's like going to be an extended fight. And then it looks like we're going to be having Frankie versus at least one number. Hopefully more, because I think Frankie versus just one number is not a particularly fun fight. Like, Frankie should be able to, I know he said he's low on cola or whatever, but he should be able to take care of a number like pretty easily. On the flip side, Usopp and Nami versus Page 1 and Ulti, I don't know about that, because the fun thing about like Usopp and Nami is that, they're always written so that on a typical day, simple, straightforward fight scenario, like on the street or something like that, they're gonna lose to probably the vast majority of decently strong characters that we run into. But because of the way their abilities work and like their fighting style, given the right scenario and like the right setup and environment, and I guess in this situation maybe even teamwork, they have the ability to take down characters like way stronger than them. Like, Nami is the biggest glass cannon in the Straw Hat crew by far. Biggest glass cannon in the Straw Hat crew by far. So as long as, she's not taking too much damage, she can take down characters like of Page 1 and Ulti's level for sure. And then Usopp, on the other hand, I wouldn't call him a glass cannon because he actually tanks a lot of damage, and he's really good at tanking a lot of damage. He doesn't have the same like offensive output as Nami, but he has the best strategic abilities out of the entire Straw Hat crew. So that sort of combination, I think, can make for like a really good duo fight against Ulti and Page 1. And kind of the way that Ulti and Page 1 have been like paired together so aggressively so far, obviously being brother and sister, like I think we could have all maybe have seen coming that like ultimately their battle would be a team battle versus 2 other characters. So in this case, if it's Usopp and Nami, like I'm excited at the prospect, I'm excited at the idea of it, but it's still like a little hard for me to wrap my head around the idea that like Usopp and Nami can actually take out these two characters, because like even if you say relative to, like if you go back to, like Usopp always punches above his weight class, right? So does Nami. She always punches above her weight class. But like even if you go back to like CP9 or something like Nami versus Khalifa, like what I'm saying is like relative to how strong Page 1 and Ulti are right now to other strong characters, like Ulti can give Luffy a bit of a hard time. Page 1 can give Sanji like a hard time and stuff like that. Like if you compare it to something like, oh, Nami fighting Khalifa, like Khalifa would never give someone like Luffy, Zoro, or Sanji a hard time. Like we saw that Sanji could easily deal with someone like Khalifa, right? Like so this is the first time that I think there's a potential for Usopp and Nami to actually take on characters that like can also straight up hang with other strong members of the Straw Hat crew, which is just a really exciting prospect. I don't count Corona because she's just like a terrible, terrible matchup for anybody else. I'm saying like these are two physically strong opponents that could also hang with like really strong Straw Hat characters, right? So I don't know if this is the actual main matchup that Usopp and Nami are getting. If it is, I think that'd be really, really cool, and that would be like the biggest challenge that they've ever had in the series. But at the same time, as you all know, I personally believe that this whole Onigashima battle is going to end in failure, so I do think it could also be a setup for them just biting off more than they could chew. And I think a lot of things are going to go south for the crew pretty soon. Like, I think Zoro and X-Drake have it a little too easy just being up against Apoo at the moment. I think Frankie has it a little too easy being up against just a number at the moment. I think that Nami and Usopp, you know, they're taking it too easy, thinking that they can take on Ulti and Page 1. So we'll see how things go. Interesting potential matchup. I don't know if it's destined to be, you know, successful for them. Now, going back upstairs to Jack versus the Sulongs, I really like what happened here. First of all, let's say Inuarashi Nekomamushi, Oda right here delivered on the Sulong design for these two. I've been looking forward to the Sulong designs for Nekomamushi and Inuarashi for the longest time. I knew when, I've said in my previous chapter review that like, I was a little disappointed that, you know, the mass Sulong transformation we got here at Onigashima was not as artistically brilliant as I was hoping Oda would make it, like max effort like that Carrot chapter. The Sulongs were mostly just kind of flying around with sort of vaguely drawn designs where you couldn't really see the details or anything like that. I was hoping for something much more expansive, more majestic, like a giant, you know, armada of like beautifully drawn like animal warriors basically flying around the sky. I thought we would get something like that, but obviously Oda only has so much time to draw. What we did get, at least, and this is why I guess he kept Inuarashi and Nekomamushi silhouetted last chapter, what we did get was a great double page spread of those two basically like in their full forms, and I think that they looked like at least as good as I imagined that they would look, right? Like to me, I would say that their designs are, I'm not going to say like among the coolest that we've seen in Wano so far, because we've gotten some cool designs in Wano so far, you know, King, obviously Kaido in his dragon form and everything like that, but they're two in Sulong form are like easily two of the coolest designs we've gotten like in Wano and across the series. I think you could compare it to anything, and I think it would hold up favorably to a degree. Now, in terms of the matchup, like I was saying, I really like what Oda did here, because if you go back to my Luffy versus Jack video, which by the way, I think that matchup is still going to happen, and again, a lot of this hinges on the idea that this is not the final battle, right? I don't think that Onigashima is the final battle. If you go back to my Luffy versus Jack idea, one of the big things I had to kind of get around was the idea that a lot of people pushed, which was that I think that people thought that Jack should be fighting Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, that they should be a rematch that happens right there, right? That's a popular idea, so that kind of contradicts the idea that, well, Luffy's going to fight Jack. So the way this worked out is, it looks like we're going to get both, or at least we got one of those out of the way, right? Like Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, they got to fight Jack, they got the revenge, but they did not have to take that Jack fight out of the equation, right? Jack isn't down for good. Jack can still fight somebody else, so Jack can still fight Luffy down the line. I think he's too weakened at the moment for Jack to get his final fight here, be it against Luffy or Jinbei like some people think. I personally don't. I think you can pin Jinbei versus Sasaki. I think you can write that in right now, personally. But I like that basically it solved that issue of like, well, when are the Dukes going to get their revenge on Jack? Doesn't that have to be a fight that has to happen? Sure, it happened. It's done. It wasn't even significant enough that we needed to linger on it, or maybe Oda had written in some more panels and just had to cut them for time or whatever. But we got that fight, and one of the things that I'd said in that video was that, look, if you think that the Dukes are going to fight Jack, to me that just never made sense as like the big fight for Jack, because if the Dukes are in, we would assume that whenever the Dukes are fighting, they would be in Sulong form, because that was just foreshadowed a while back. And we can assume that like, if the Dukes can individually go toe-to-toe with Jack by themselves, then the Dukes together in Sulong form, which is a ridiculous power-up, they would just trample Jack. That's exactly what I said in that video, that it would just be like barely a fight. They would just run over Jack. So like, I don't know why people are really excited at the idea of the two Sulongs versus Jack, because it just wouldn't be an extended fight. It would just be over like that. And that's what happened, right? We see the Dukes are completely uninjured, and Jack just had no chance against them, because that's the reality of it. Like, the two Dukes who are equal to him roughly, almost individually in base form, both of them together in Sulong form, that's not a fight. That's a massacre. So, got that out of the way. They got their revenge. Jack can live to fight another day and get his main fight, ideally against Luffy, again, based on my thought process, I think against Luffy, but potentially against Jinbei or somebody else or whatever. So the Jack fight is still in the realm of possibility. It's going to happen at some point, but we also got that checked off, that he doesn't have to fight the Dukes anymore because they got that out of the way. I personally actually think that the Dukes right now in Sulong form, in my opinion, and by the way, it's going to be hard to avoid talking about power scaling at this point, because come on, we're in the middle of the war, right? Like, how are you gonna read this entire war and like somehow avoid talking about power scaling? That's just not how it works. We're reading a shonen, right? So let's not. I don't want to see any of that in the comments. I think that the Dukes right now, in Sulong form, if the Dukes in base form are like roughly equal to, you know, a commander, a third commander, if you want to get technical or whatever, but like, you know, if they're roughly equal to someone like Jack, a commander, a top fighter of a Yonko, then I think them right now in their maxed out Sulong form, knowing how much of a boost Sulong is based on carrot, right? It's like, it seems like a ridiculous multiplier in terms of your strength and speed and abilities and everything like that. I could see them being, you know, comparable to Luffy or Kid at the moment. And I don't think that that's such a wild take. Maybe a wild take would be saying that I think they're stronger than Luffy or Kid. But, you know, we're going to have to wait and see. But I don't think it's crazy to say that the Dukes in Sulong form are, like, up there with anybody else in the Alliance at the moment, because it's just such a ridiculous multiplier. So, I'm excited to see them versus Kaido. How they do versus Kaido, because they're the two heaviest hitters right now that the Samurai squad basically have, the 9 Scabbards. I think they've easily put themselves above, like, Ashura Doji, Denjiro, for example, because, you know, we already saw Inuarashi was equal to Ashura Doji, like, just in his base form. So I think Sulong form, those two are easily the heaviest hitters that they have. And even Kaido is complimenting them, saying that, you know, these two are just too strong. And by the way, that's like an interesting quote that he had, because, you know, when Doflamingo was defeated, right? When Doflamingo was defeated by Luffy and Law, Kaido mentioned, Joker, you're just too weak. It's not your fault. Here, Kaido is actually even acknowledging, like, Jack, you're not weak. These two guys are just something else. So that's like big praise coming from, you know, the big man himself. And that is interesting that, like, Jack is one of Kaido's hand-picked lead performers, as he said. So he's not just going to dismiss him as being too weak, like he thought of Doflamingo, for example. Maybe that even goes towards how Kaido thinks of Doflamingo's strength versus Jack's strength. But of course, we know Jack is, as I said, one of Kaido's personal warriors, so maybe he's just going to have more of a bias towards him, for example. I think we generally just need to see more of Jack against other people before we get an idea of, like, how strong Jack actually is. Anyway, beyond all that, the last thing was Kinemon cutting the fire attack. This was something that I personally didn't love, not for power scaling reasons. Like, I understand Kinemon can cut fire. That's the thing he can do. That's his entire name. His name is, you know, Foxfire Kinemon. Like, if he can't cut fire, then that would be kind of ridiculous. The reason I personally didn't like it was just because that's, as far as we know, that's Kaido's, like, most powerful attack, I guess, or at least most in terms of, like, area damage. That's just his most impressive attack that he's shown. and it might just be his strongest attack. You know, he's in his dragon form, he shoots a big blast and everything like that. So the reason I personally didn't like it was because I was kind of looking forward to a moment where, like, somebody stopped that attack. Like, if Luffy were to stop that with armament haki or something like that, like putting up a barrier. Or, you know, Zoro much earlier talked about, like, oh, I want to learn how to cut fire or something like that. If down the line we got, like, Zoro thrown into the fray against Kaido for, like, a little bit, I thought it would have been a great moment if Zoro had, like, started to learn some stuff like Rio or something along those lines. If Zoro got a really big moment cutting the fire against Kaido or something. It's just the idea that that's, like, a really big attack that Kaido has, and we see it stopped or dealt with so easily. Again, it's not about the logic of it. It's not about the power scaling. I understand Kinemon can do it. I'm just saying it felt a little less impactful to me that it's happening, so casually, so early on, when I felt like, you know, on paper, imagine how, if Kinemon didn't do it here, imagine how amazing it would be, like, if we got to see Zoro cut it, like, towards a climactic part of the battle, like him cutting fire for the first time and it's Kaido's attack. So it just felt like a moment that could have been more iconic or something like that, or one of the standout moments of Wano. It is going to be like a more forgotten moment in an earlier panel. And now at this point, because Kinemon's done it so easily, it's just not going to be as impressive. Like if, I'm using Zoro again as the example here because that's just what I'm thinking of at the moment. If Zoro does cut Kaido's attack later down the line, it's just not, it's going to feel a little more meh. Like, yeah, of course he's supposed to be able to do that. You know what I mean? Whereas if he was the first one to be shown doing it, it would just be a bigger moment that would be a lot more memorable and iconic. So, sorry if this felt like an iconic moment to you. I apologize. I just personally don't think it was even the best moment of the chapter. You know what I mean? So, like, it just felt like seeing Kaido's big fire attack basically be dealt with so easily earlier on in this arc, basically. I just feel like it takes away a little bit from, like, what could have been later down the line when the main protagonists that we care more about are taking on Kaido. That's about it. But overall, like, I don't have a problem with it power scaling wise. It just makes sense. Now, the scabbards and the future, because we're going to end every chapter review. I don't know if you've been noticing, we're going to end every chapter review talking about the future. The scabbards are just asking to die at this point, right? They're just begging for it. They're like, please kill us. We're done. We are here to die. You can start planting the graves right now. We're out of here, right? Like, they're here to die, right? I don't know if they're all going to die. I don't know if they're all going to die is the thing. But at least some of them are going to die. They're planting their own death flags, literally, right? They're planting their own death flags, like, right in front of them. It's kind of crazy how badly these guys want to die. So, I fully expect several of them to die. I definitely think that we're going to get some good moments of them. I think it just started, basically, with this chapter. I think they're going to get some good moments of them versus Kaido, get a little bit of revenge in. I think they're going to get some more cuts in. I think Inuarashi, Nekomamushi are definitely going to show off pretty well next chapter. Maybe not next chapter, but maybe the chapter after that or something like that. Depends how Oda wants to pace things out. I just think that they're going to get their hits in, they're going to get their good moments in, and then Kaido's going to get serious and then wipe the floor with them. And that's basically how things are going to go. My personal prediction is that, and I'll tell you I'm basing most of this on what I feel like is going to be something similar that we can look back on in the future and kind of compare to. I think the ending of Marineford, that's how I'm going to kind of view this, because again, you guys all know I think that this is not going to end in success for them, at least this battle. So if we compare it to, like, the ending stretch of Marineford, which was chapters like 570 to like 580. If you look at that stretch of chapters, I feel like we could get something somewhat similar, where, like, it starts off on, like, a really big high with everything seemingly going their way. I think maybe the chapter before or something like that, Luffy had just unleashed Conqueror's Haki. Then, you know, from 570 onwards, like, they're leading the charge. They're rushing towards the execution stand. They actually get to the execution stand. Mr. 3 makes the key. Luffy frees Ace. Ace is out. They're getting away. Whitebeard's making his sin and everything like that. They're basically home free. Ace defends against Akainu and stuff like that. They're out of there. It looks like they have won. And then there's a sudden twist at the end of, I'm pretty sure it's 573, because I checked a little bit recently. A twist at the end of 573 where suddenly Akainu gets Ace. And then from there, everything is just downhill, like a really drastic, steep drop in terms of, like, the protagonist's momentum, because there's everything, like bad things one after another happening, right? Like Ace is dead, then Whitebeard is got half his face missing, then the Blackbeard pirates show up, then Whitebeard's dead, then Blackbeard's got his fruit, then Akainu's back. All of that stuff basically going in like a terrible downward spiral. I think that we could get something very similar to this. And again, I was saying that happened between a stretch of chapters from 570 to 580. I think we're at a very similar spot right now between 990 and chapter 1000. So I don't know if it's going to happen in that exact same way. But for fun, let's say my current prediction is basically the end of chapter 573 was when things kind of flipped, right? The tables turned, Akainu got Ace. My prediction will be, I think 993, if we're going with that exact same sort of 10 chapter run, 993, I think like everything will be going well over 992. Things are obviously going well right now in 991. Things are going well 991. I think things will continue to go well 992. I think they'll continue to go well 993. My prediction will be the end of 993. Yeah, let's say the end in 993. I think that there's going to be something that happens that kind of changes the game. Something that happens that changes the game that makes it go in a much more negative direction. So I don't know what it would be. Maybe that's when Kaido goes hybrid mode and starts attacking the Scabbards or something like that. Maybe there's a drastic death right there. Maybe that's when Kinemon goes. But yeah, I'll say 993 is my prediction. And I'm basing it purely on that same 10 chapter run in Marineford that I think that this could be very similar to. Now, there's a lot more going on here than Marineford, so maybe I'm off by like a few chapters or something. Maybe it happens a little later. But, you know, you got to make a prediction and stick to it. So I'll say 993, and we'll see how it goes. So my prediction right now, end of 993, something big, very negative is going to happen at the end of the chapter to kill a lot of the positive momentum that's going on. So if you enjoyed this review, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe below, and I'll talk to you all next week.